and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 946th New Social Environment. I'm Carolyn, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Katy Moran and Andrew Woolbright. We're thrilled to welcome poet Mel Elberg here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter, and that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we're speaking from. And now to introduce today's guest and host. Katy Moran lives and works in Hertfordshire. Moran is best known for abstract paintings which explore form, color, and surface. Until now, her process has involved pushing, pulling, and distorting paint. Introducing accident and chance creates a dynamism that is both liberating and surprising as the artist oscillates between control and allowing the nature of the paint to inform the work. Moran's work has been the subject of several international solo and group exhibitions, and her work is included in important public and private collections. Artist, curator, and critic Andrew Woolbright is based in Brooklyn, New York, and is an MFA graduate from RISD in painting. Woolbright is the founder and director of the gallery Below Grand, located on the Lower East Side. In addition to curating, he is an editor-at-large here at the Brooklyn Rail, and he currently teaches at the School of Visual Arts and Pratt Institute. Thank you all so much for joining today, and I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
Hi, everyone. Wonderful seeing you all today on this beautiful afternoon and getting ready for the holidays. I'm so excited to get to talk about this show. I've known Katy's work since grad school, actually, way back in 2012. I was just telling her that I had a professor of mine show me her work that she's doing in the very beginning of her practice, and I've been watching and paying attention ever since. So this is a dream come true to get to talk to you and really explore your practice through language. So hi, Katy.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, but we have a lot to get through today. So let's start with the first slide if we can and jump right in to it. So Katy's show up at Spur on Westwater, How to Paint Like an Athlete. We have this wonderful installation view, and I'd like to get into this further, but kind of really distinct color orientations for this show, and splitting between this turquoise and this orange system. Could we skip ahead to slide 5 real quick? This is the work that I was first introduced to with Katy's work of and these backgrounds and spaces that had this very distinct figure-ground relationship that for me feels like a Gainsborough piece or like a Joshua Reynolds piece, but then where there should be a subject or a figure, there's this wonderful churning movement. And so I'm excited, Katy. How are you thinking about these original paintings that you were doing? Some of your first paintings you did out of grad school.
It's really quite funny looking at this now because it's quite topical. So it's quite funny. I'm learning tennis at the minute, and there's a man at the local tennis club who is coaching me, and he's also an amateur painter. And he sent me a painting that he'd made the other day, and immediately I did what I do, which is I kind of immediately transpose something abstract on top of the figurative element of his painting. And it's just so funny how similar it is to this, because, you know, just as you described, you have this kind of relatively representational landscape, and then in the middle where there should be the subject, it's just sort of dynamic abstract brush marks. And that's exactly what I transposed onto his painting literally a couple of days ago. So it's funny how constant that is for me.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I understood the work that I was making at the time really had a relationship to this, but I just remember seeing this and understanding why this faculty member showed it to me, that it really inverted this relationship, like where you expect to see the subject of the painting, you're creating absence or just raw movement or disconnected frenzy. And I love that there, you know, there's no there. There's kind of a void, but also it becomes its own subject, all that churning. And can we see the other one too? The next one that does a similar, yeah, love this. How are you creating these images? They had direct references, or you're looking at a painting and then kind of stepping into that painting as well?
So at the time I made these, it was before the Apple iPhone. So, you know, I don't know if you remember those phones, but they had tiny screens, really. And I was looking at Google Images, but at existing paintings or objects, images, but they were so small on this screen that it was actually really helpful because it, you know, it cut out too much detail and you could just kind of see. It's like when you squint your eyes and you just see what's important. It was very helpful in that way. And so I was painting from those, and I remember I would directly paint from those, but at a certain point I would bring in something of my own. So, you know, to then make it my own and move away from the image that had sparked an interest or the, you know, initial inspiration for the painting, whether that be the color palette or the mood of it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I that's very relatable. I feel like I'm all the time looking at a tiny tile on my phone and being like, "Oh my God, what did I take a picture of? That's so vivid." And I pull it up and I'm like, "Oh, that's boring." Like I like just that when it's a fragment, how vibrant it can be.
Yes, definitely. I still do that now. Like I'll screenshot pictures that I like, but then I'll often look at them in, like you say, in photos where you see a collection of them
Mm.
because it reduces it down to its sort of most important points or its simplicity. And I like that.
And I mean, I when I first saw these, I kind of liked that you were like creating an event in the middle of the painting. Like you're really trying to bring us into this. There's a there's a way that you very quickly set up like a romantic landscape and then said, this is like a placeholder of an event. This is where this goes. I think now that I'm a little older, I do view these as bodies, or I do see the figuration in them, or I feel like there's a collection of movements or maybe figures kind of stacked on each other. But I wonder, I feel like we're going to get into this. And if we can move to the next slide, uh, there is a history that I all of my favorite painters engage with, Asger Jorn, and um, here we have two works by Lee Krasner. Remember this show at Tate St Gallery a few years ago, Strategic Vandalism, of artists that took thrift store paintings and painted over the top of it. But to me, and this is my theory, it feels very different than the way you're doing it. And I'm interested in, like, not to get too psychological, but how do you feel stepping into a painting? Your relationship to the thing that you're interacting with, like, what is it? Is it a conversation? Is it a joust? How are you thinking about it?
I don't think about it in that way, like you mean like an intellectual way, don't you? A
Well, I
thinking
mean,
way, a conscious way. Like
hmm,
I don't really think about it. It's very intuitive and I just
hmm,
kind of grab what sparks an interest for me and gets me to a place of interest in the painting. But I
hmm.
mean, you know, if I do think about these things, I can think about why I might be drawn to it. And I did a talk recently and someone said, you know, it is like you're having a collaboration with someone that you've never met. And I guess that makes sense. And then as I was saying to you about this person who's teaching me tennis, and I thought about painting over his painting, it kind of became a bit more apparent to me what that actually means, you know, how offensive that could be, or like you say, a kind of act of vandalism. But I've never, and I remember there's like a hint of anarchy about it or something, but I don't know how much I've thought about it in that way. I mean, I like the things that I find, and in a way, I feel like I'm elevating them again because they've been discarded. You know, they're in charity shops and they're very cheap. And there was obviously a time when they were more valued, and now they're not. So you could see it that way, you know, that the energy of them is being refreshed and they're being repurposed.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I want to bring up this show as a contrast because, you know, when I look at, you know, Asger Jorn or Julian Schnabel or Dieter Roth or or Howard Hodgkin, even some of the people included in this show and elsewhere, or Jim Shaw, it feels like painting over someone else's painting is always kind of like a joke on the other person you're painting over. It's a relationship to taste or a relationship to kitsch. And yours doesn't feel like that. It's not trying to negate or erase someone. It feels like, I've interpreted as, it feels like you're trying to step into a conversation, maybe, or like step into a dance that's already ongoing and finding the rhythm to it. Maybe. I don't know if that's something that relates to you and how you're thinking about it.
Um, yeah, I mean,
Like maybe it's a
I'm
more like,
interested in taste and in kitsch, and I kind of have an affection for those things. I don't think the cynicism is there for me. It's not. But again, it brings up a different conversation, I suppose, about thinking. I mean, there's a book I read recently called Zen in the Art of Archery, and that there's a Zen master who says, you know, man is a thinking reed, but his best works are done when he is not thinking, not calculating. And I definitely understand what is meant by that, and like to operate from a more of an intuitive place and a place of feeling rather than thinking.
And I'm interested in, because I do feel like they have such a strong relationship to your earlier works, but is you not painting the background yourself and start stepping into this other person's painting that you don't know, a stranger's space, is that what allows you to have that fluid spontaneity, or like not thinking through, like thinking through the body and the hand?
Sorry, can you just say that question again? Because I was just trying to take it in.
Of course. Yeah, like is that why you stepped away from painting your own backgrounds? That like,
Oh, yeah.
conversing with someone else's idea of a painting lets you kind of not have to think about the first step, you can kind of just find the rhythm, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like I said before, it gets me to a place of interest very quickly, and I can utilize their marks without having to kind of build up the surface.
Mhm.
That said, it's something that I'm thinking about maybe returning to, this idea of just starting with a new canvas and building up, and
Mhm.
perhaps going back into painting the background myself. I feel like I want to open up the practice a bit more, where I'm painting on found paintings, and found framed paintings, but also unframed canvases, and then back to new canvases, just to kind of test these things again.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, if we could go to the next slide, because I'd like to start getting into the show now. But also in the past, you've incorporated like fabric and paper and more collage. And for this show, it is maneuvers of acrylic on these found paintings and these frames that you've described do have a relationship to sentimentality and kitsch and the embarrassment of something. But what was the step away to not include for this show, anyways, fabric and paper and collage?
There is a little bit of collage
Mhm.
in some of them. Um,
Mhm.
and I have used collage from time to time. Um, I like using collage as a sort of method of uh, it's almost like tricking yourself. So you kind of build up layers of collage as if that is going to be the surface of the painting, and
Mhm.
then ripping it all away to
Mhm.
then get a fresh energy. I quite enjoyed that with collage. And then since I started using my body in my painting, uh, specifically using my bum in
Mhm.
my paintings, and the mark would normally be round, but then to try and make different marks, I would use masking tape to kind of mask off certain areas.
Mhm.
And so then sometimes that masking tape would then end up kind of in amongst the paint, and then I would keep it in an almost sort of accidental way. It would become part of the painting.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel all the collage work there was a period of time where I was making a lot of collage work, and it was when I was pregnant, really.
Mhm.
Um, and because it was two things really. I felt since I left the Royal College of Art, I had this sense that I was running behind myself, and I kind of wanted to just expel work to get
Mhm.
me to a certain place. And there wasn't much attachment or investment to one particular piece. And then
Mhm.
I obviously got enough out my system. And then there was this point at which I was like, right, I want to invest more time on one, on a particular piece. But also being pregnant, I didn't actually have the physical energy that you need to kind of paint in this way.
Mhm.
And so collage was a way to kind of manage that, and to
Mhm.
work in a slower kind of different energy, because when you don't know what you're going to paint, and you're kind of uh, sometimes almost wrestling with the thing to find something, it takes a lot of physical energy. And
Mhm.
I don't think I even realized how much it took until I felt so ill being pregnant. So I think that was the reason for a lot of collage at that point. But then obviously now, you know, I feel good and I have the energy to invest. And yeah, so honestly, like my preference would be for straight painting if I have the choice.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
That's interesting. But
yeah.
do you still feel like you maintain that, like you said, that density of collage to stand for different periods of time, or that buildup of surface? Is that what you, for me, that's like what it feels like you're now doing without the found images or the found fabrics, is like this sense that things are done in different stages.
Oh, rather than just one sitting.
Yeah, even if that's an illusion, it just feels like this kind of drip and spread has a different material history than maybe the thing next to it. That there's like something behind, and it's maybe not a spatial thing, but it's like a like it's like looking at layers of the earth, or there's like some type of like strata to your gesture.
Layers of the earth. This is interesting, but you might have to explain more. Do you mean like in a temporal way, you know, different
Hmm.
layers over is
Yeah, like do you
yeah.
think, like I know it's difficult, which is wonderful about it, to talk about, you know, the discursive or the thinking part, because what makes these paintings phenomenal is that it is trusting the hand and trusting your body to do the mark. But are you thinking about who you were when you made the first move versus who you are when you make the next move?
Oh, sorry, can you explain more? Thinking about who I am when I make the first move, as opposed to
Yeah,
who I am when I'm. What
yeah.
do you
Are you thinking,
mean?
like, are you thinking about, um, you know, like reacting against yourself, or is it really just about trying to not have a mind and trying to just create some sense of harmony or some sense of collision, or dialectics, or whatever word you want to use, some tension? Are you thinking about tension, or are you thinking about relating things to yourself and your own ideas of a style, maybe?
I I don't think I think in that way when I'm making them. I mean, I think a lot
Mm,
about strengthening the intuitive impulse.
mm,
And of course, I can't say whether the impulses I'm having are truly intuitive impulses or impulses, conscious intention. Um, but I'm glad the impulses are there and the
mm,
impulses come through quite clearly. And
mm,
I tend to follow them without questioning them a lot of the time, I would
mm,
say.
mm.
Um, but yeah, that is a very good question about how much you kind of forget yourself. Um,
I mean,
truly.
the way you're describing it there, it kind of reminds me of like Chinese calligraphy, where it's like you become the waterfall that you're painting, or there is no sense of self. It is just like you become the thing that you're painting, and you lose your sense of self or body. Is that maybe a little more accurate?
Yes, exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
I've read a few Stephen Kotler books on flow state, and he talks exactly
Mm-hmm.
about that in terms of surfers. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
surfer becomes one with the wave. The surfer is the wave. And
Mm-hmm.
also the Tao Te Ching, which is translated as the Book of the Way. Lao Tzu talks about this kind of doing, not doing. He says, you know, an athlete can get into a state of body awareness where the right movement happens effortlessly without interference of conscious will. And in the way, like you're saying, the poem writes the poem, the painting makes the painting. I'm very interested in that, and in this idea of flow state, which we are all in when we're kind of immersed in something that we find purposeful. The ego, the sense of self, the neurotic self switches off, goes offline, and we're entirely in the moment. And we can't think about the past or the future. And that kind of immersion where the ego self is quietened down is considered to be the optimal state for creativity, for focus, for concentration. But this leads back to the title, why I called it Paint Like an Athlete, because it's almost becomes irrelevant what you're doing, whether you're an artist, an athlete, a business person, an actor. It's tapping into these states, which I'm very interested in life, in my hobbies, in the things around the painting, and then in the making of the painting. Everything kind of tallies up. Yeah.
I find that fascinating, and that's what I was really hoping everything was about with your work, because going back to that strategic vandalism show, it's more Oedipal, it's more self versus self, and you're actually like emptying yourself and just trying to be present and reactive. You know, that's like a way more interesting kind of metaphysical, almost spiritual thing. It's not about negation or you, it's about who you can be when you're not thinking.
Well, just to say, when you mention spiritual, you know, it reminds me of Eckhart Tolle, because in The Power of Now, he talks about most of us not being able to get out of our minds long enough to make anything of true beauty, to kind of tap into our inner essence, because we live in such a mind-dominated culture. So yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in this, but it goes back to a little kind of a epiphany I had like way back in my 20s, which kind of changed the way I made art. Because basically up until my 20s, I was kind of a bit of a perfectionist, I suppose, and I was all about tight control of the medium and you know, exact rendering, whether it was observational drawing or painting or reportage, still life, whatever. And then I had this moment with paint where this moment of slippage happened, and it was better than anything that I had consciously tried to create. And I had this moment where I thought, wow, you know, that turns everything I've done up to this point on its head, because do I exert tighter control of this medium, or do I go with this exploration? And then I read a book called How Not to Paint by Marion Milner. And then, you know, that linked to automatism and Francis Bacon and this idea of, and I was thinking about this when you showed the earlier works, where the figurative, the representational, you know, one opinion would be that that gives you access to the painting, but in a way it's more of a barrier if you're thinking in this way, because it's this idea that illustrational painting, you kind of see it intellectually, whereas if you paint in a way that is not illustration and conveys by sensation, it kind of hits you in the nervous system and then leaks back to the brain. And it's, I suppose it's yeah, kind of you make a choice, which one which one do you believe has the most power?
Mm. Yeah.
And then yeah,
And you chose the body wonderfully, or the nervous system, for that reaction. Uh, and I love that. I love that sense of. I guess I want to go into the title of the show, of
mm,
thinking of an athlete, which, like, I think of an athlete, if we hold it to that kind of allegory for the show, I think of like an athlete having like such regiment, like
mm,
really, practicing and conditioning the thing that when you're in the game, like you said, you don't think at all, you're just reacting. And I'm wondering what your regiment is like to get yourself into these flow states. Like, is it a drawing practice, or how do you find yourself finding this pleasantness in the work?
well, meditation is a big part of it, and
Mm,
trying to build in antidotes to kind of modern life during my day, so periods of flow state. Um, like I say, I'm learning piano and tennis at the minute, which I feel nothing acts in isolation. Everything informs each other, and there's this kind of idea of active rest, and that while you're working on other things, problems in music or tennis or whatever, your subconscious is also working out answers for painting, and they kind of all reflect back
mm,
on each other and help each other. Um, but yeah, I have definitely become very holistic, thinking about everything I do in my day and everything around the painting to facilitate that kind of state, so that when I get in the studio, I can, optimize the flow state.
mm,
Um, and I think that is why I was interested in having this title, because, I think for a long time there's kind of been this myth of the artist, like people would ask me over the years, people who are not artists, how do you make your work? Do you wait for the inspiration to strike, or do you go in
mm,
every day? And there's this idea that the creative inspiration is like this elusive kind of magic, and you just have to grab it when it comes. And, you
mm,
know, versus this kind of other way of kind of priming the body to
mm,
facilitate this and secure the inspiration and the creativity.
mm,
Yeah, and
mm,
you're absolutely right. I think, yeah, everything that you do during the day reflects back on that time in the
mm.
studio. Yeah.
Well, I love that form of generosity, because, like you said, it is, unfortunately becoming more and more revolutionary to while everything moves faster and faster and has descriptive answers for everything that it does, like finding the time to meditate, and it does take time and boredom, as you said. It takes time to get into that, and then a lot of work to stay present. And like you said, a physical exhaustion. Like, how are you feeling going back to that active rest? How do you feel when you're making these? Are they vibrant? Do you hit points of exhaustion with them, since they are so bodily?
Not really, no, because I really I prioritize rest. I mean, it's going back to the athlete thing again, but I always used to feel it's such a fine art as an athlete to kind of get all the training so that you have the stamina and the training, but then on race day or whatever, you're like fresh as a daisy. And it's like that balance of, it's like writers often leave the studio just as they've got something good, or, they kind of leave it so that when they come in the next day, they're in a good place, they can get back into the flow of it. But I feel like I work for intensely for a very focused amount of time, but I feel it's crucial when I leave as well. I feel like this is so crucial, actually, having the clarity to see when is the right time to stop and leave, and when is
1000%
the
agree.
right time to stop working on a painting and wait and sort of
Yeah.
catch up to yourself, you know, before you go back into it. And I'm sort of hyper aware of this at the moment, and just really just sort of being with it, and having the patience with it and enjoying it. Yeah.
I was just thinking of that in the studio a day ago, which is that like all my favorite paintings I've ever made, I started and then didn't work on for like 8 months, and then was able to look at it with really fresh eyes of like having real distance to it. And it's rare that you get to do that, but it's so nice, like you said, so important to give yourself space to walk away and get outside of that universe and re-engage it again.
I know, I was saying this just the other day, like what a lovely pursuit, you know, to be able to do that, to have these things around, these things that you're creating, and to just sit with them and think about them and watch them, and you know, wait for the answers to come. I mean, it's just such it's a gift, really, isn't it? It's a privilege to be able to do that. Um,
Can we go back to focus, like that intense focus and an intense time? Are you working on these
yeah.
one at a time, or are you working on a room of these and kind of moving back and forth so it's impulsive, or is it impulse relegated to one thing at a time?
No, I've always worked on, you know, a few things at one time, but
Mm,
now I'm trying to expand that, so work on even more things at one time, and
mm,
just wait a little bit longer perhaps before I go into something again. And there's about 11 canvases in the studio at the minute that I'm working on at the same time, and they're all helping each other. They're all kind of working together. So that's interesting.
Do you find yourself
Yeah.
carrying over rhythms from one painting to the next? Like I know, like do you make a mark in one and then you say like, oh, it's spread throughout a few of these, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, they I don't even know if this is correct English, but this is, they start to tell each other, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
They tell each other. One gives me the answer to the next. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's like they're almost happening all at the same time, and I keep doing the same thing on each one, which then further confirms to me what my preoccupation is. And
Hmm.
then I might reaffirm it in the next, you know, the one next to it. And then that will then reaffirm the one that I was just doing. And then, yeah, they're helping each other,
Yeah,
definitely. Um,
I love that language, affirmation or reaffirming or standing each other up, or making each other stronger together through
y-
language.
y- yeah,
I
I
wonder
think
because
it's,
I
yeah, sorry.
sorry.
No, no,
Is it?
you go.
Oh, yeah, I think we have a little bit of a delay. I'm so sorry. But
Mhm.
I also wonder too, and I know it is so important to keep it in flow state, but like I think of the other role of the athlete is like kind of like recorded gesture. It's like I played baseball in high school, and it was like you're not thinking of the swing once it comes time for the at bat, you repeat it, or it's like a repetition. And I'm wondering if there are marks that you make in your work that you're like, oh, I've done it so many times, or I felt that so many times in my wrist that I notice it or see it as something I fall back to in that rhythm. Or is it, or are you really trying to make something new and fresh each time that's like not repeating the rhythm? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've definitely always wanted to have a plurality and an openness in the work so that I have room to maneuver and experiment and try different things, all whilst, maintaining my identity, if you like.
Mhm.
Um, but I do like to sometimes reflect about, because I forget the different, I mean, you call them strategies or tools in the toolkit, different ways, different,
Mhm.
ways that I've used to make the mark or make the painting. And I try to remember all of them and think, how can I utilize them all? But since I did transcendental meditation a year ago, and there's this idea that um, transcendental meditation promotes self-actualization, which means
Mhm.
a kind of returning to our essential nature, if you like. And I titled the paintings in the show, some of them, You Be Your Nature, I'll Be Mine, because I felt like my preoccupation with the paint and the particularities of the paint were coming through with more clarity. And I feel that, my nature with the medium, why am I going in every day and using this medium? What is the point of this? What is it about? What is it the crux of this relationship? And what's my nature? And then what is the paint's nature? And I feel that it's coming through with greater clarity, what my preoccupations are. And this there's there's quite a comfort in that actually at the moment, which is,
Mhm.
I mean, it's what you want to do as an artist, isn't it? You want clarity on your preoccupation with this thing. What is the essential knob of this relationship, if you like?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I think about, I really like how Cecily Brown talks about how if you if you do someone else's mark like 5 or 6 times, then it just is in your hand, and then you know proliferate Monet everywhere, or you proliferate Hockney, or like once you kind of study something, then it's just like you said, it's in the toolbox, to use that language. And I'm wondering if there's like a mark you've seen in some of these slides, or if there's like a move, like a scrape, or like a flattening, or that brush that you think of, kind of like familiar, like a familiar tool in the toolbox. So you're like, oh, it's time for this smudge, or it's time for this drip, or it's time for this. It's time to use the body part for this area. Like, how are you thinking about that familiarity of intuitiveness? Or is there specific
Yeah,
things that you're like, oh, that's the mark I like making in this situation, from what we've shown?
yeah, no, I definitely think there's that, I can balance this mark with that mark, this energy, the energy of the drip, the energy of paint being its nature with, this complex, fine buildup of detail, which is my nature,
Mhm.
or the mark making with the body, which is kind of a combination of my nature plus accident and chance, but a kind of orchestration of the paint. So it's, yeah, I definitely think um, about that, utilizing these kind of different energies and different marks. Um, Yeah, sort of capitalizing on what I have, rather as well as kind of always recognizing that you're in flux and things are always moving and changing and new impulses and tuning into different things, and but also, yeah, capitalizing on what I have, the plethora of kind of options. Hmm.
Do you see
Yeah.
them as like a type of like forward progress? Because I mean, like, I think too of like, they are so wonderfully differentiated. There's like so much freedom to these. Like, this one is so radically different than the last two, which were like, I don't. I don't feel like you're trying to say the same thing twice. You have moves within it that hold it together, so it is your work. But I mean, are you thinking about it of like challenging yourself of like, I don't want to do
Oh,
something that
yeah.
looks like something else? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to challenge myself and I always want a kind of fresh energy. I don't want to just lean on something, you know?
Mhm.
And at the same time, you know, maybe you're not leaning on something, you're just capitalizing on something. So I just, you know, depends how you
Mhm.
phrase it. But yeah, I'd always be looking for a fresh energy. Does
Yeah,
that
I
answer
think
your
that,
question?
yeah, it does, because I think that's really, really profound and really remarkable within your work. I think of like works that I associate with like meditation or like a spiritual practice. You do fall into like making the same type of, you know, meditative marks or circular marks or whatever it is you do. And these are meditative and flow state, but you're always managing to pull off something really challenging and different with each one. It is like, it doesn't feel like you're falling back too much on familiarity. It feels like each one is a challenge to yourself in a way that I guess I've always formed that as like a contradiction with meditation, but it's not necessarily. It's like you're finding new versions of yourself and new challenges to painting within each flow state.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder where sometimes if that's where the life of the painting comes from because you surprised yourself, something
Mhm.
unexpected happens, and that's where the fresh energy is. But at the same time, saying that I'm, you know, always looking for something fresh and new, I feel like there are recurrent themes coming back through the
Mhm.
painting, um, and I'm enjoying kind of allowing for that, but they feel like, yeah, quite different strands of the practice. Like in the current show, there's a run of paintings on one wall, um, and I kind of see them as quite representational. And a
Mhm.
few of them are called Circus Town Nowhere, which is this kind of recurring um, fictitious circus town that comes through, either, you know, sometimes more literally than others, but it just evokes to me the kind of uh, idea or aesthetics of a circus kind of mood. And then on the
Mhm.
opposite wall, I feel they're very abstract, the ones that are you be your nature, I'll be mine.
Mhm.
And I'm in the studio at the moment, and I've kind of tuned back into my grandparents' living room, which
Mhm.
is quite funny because for this show, I was inspired by my living room and the color of my living room wall. But
Mhm.
I think uh, throughout my practice, I've called certain paintings down at Dean Row, which is the name of my grandparents' home where they used to live. And
Mhm.
this new batch of paintings I'm making kind of evoke memories of their living room or this kind of aesthetic. Um, which is coming through in the painting.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. And it helps me sort of key into something. And then
Mhm.
I like that the idea of that then existing with the more abstract paintings, existing with the more, I mean, I say sort of color field painting, but I think just more of an emphasis on color and space. And um, yeah, I'm interested in this, them all coexisting, different strands.
Huh. I love the title of this one. It's really funny and great. I like I feel like humor plays a role, but I want to build off what you said because I really enjoy, and I think that maybe this gets into, you know, you've talked in the past about like Bacon's non-illustrated forms as being important, but I think of like as an artist that oblique look that you've talked about. Like I always think of the power as a painter specifically of like undisclosed specific, that like we're meditating on something very vivid and specific to us, but then it's kind of withheld. It is like your parents' living room that we don't get to experience, that you're using really to channel a painting. Like I love that those layers of withholding and inviting and the explosion of that comes out of anchoring them to such specific moments in your life, I think is wonderful. That's what it takes to kind of enact this gesture or like think through space in the way that you're doing. Which ones are which? Are the orange ones the ones from your grandparents' living room?
No, none of this show. I mean,
Oh,
I
okay,
say that,
gotcha.
I think it's kind of it's always hovering in the background.
Right.
But I just, since this show and now I'm back in the studio, I noticed that I kind of tuned into it. You know, it wasn't conscious or intentional. It just kind of happened. But it's, you know, it's not surprising really, because there was this focus on the domestic, and this show being inspired by my living room and the colors in my living room. And then I've been carrying paintings back and forth from the studio to the home, thinking about working on paintings in the home rather than just in the studio, because I feel it's helping somehow. So it's not that surprising that I've kind of keyed into my grandparents' living room. Yeah.
I love the scale of this one. It's so difficult to place. I guess it is a type of shortened torso or a type of body, but like, you know, maybe like a window in a nave, or like a window in like a church or something. Like just the thinness of this painting, and then like this lake effect at the bottom is really exciting to me.
It's funny that you mentioned church, because where it was installed, you know, and with the architecture of the gallery, I kind of saw, and then the fact that the back room was painted, and it kind of reminded me a little of Rothko's chapel, this kind of mellow, more meditative space. But there's something about, yeah, the architecture. I did start thinking about something religious, sort of religious feel.
Yeah, that
interesting.
That back room definitely, that's wonderful. That, yeah, I got the Rothko Chapel vibe, but in this color sensibility. In going back to Regiment, you are kind of sticking to a pretty closed loop of color. Like there's the turquoisey paintings and the orange paintings, and then the back room. How are those biographical choices, like you said, thinking of your living room or thinking of specific spaces in the circus that inform that?
The blue wall in my living room definitely sparked the paintings, and then I think I just thought I would stay with this color palette, because there's no reason for me to do anything, you know. There's no reason for me to stick with any particular palette. And I think in the past I may have tuned into, you know, different palettes or flitted from one to the next. And I think I felt quite happy in that palette. And I just, I mean, I tend to just go with what I have an affinity for in the moment, but I do seem to be still. It's now we're in autumn, the colors have become more autumnal, but I'm still working with exploring color, and that does seem to be predominantly blues and purples and turquoise. But yeah, when I was making the show, as we got into high summer, the blues became quite intense turquoise, which was interesting. So yeah, kind of influenced by the seasons, I think.
I love that.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't know, you know, I was thinking today, could it really be any color? I don't know how particular it is that it's blue. Like I'm happy exploring with blue at the moment, but I don't know how particular it is that it needs to be.
Well, I think of like, I mean, I always love, there's a Carolee Schneemann quote that I found where she says, blue is the most agile color. It can dance around the palette. It can shift to warms, and it can shift. It plays nicely with everything else on a painter's palette. It has a range to it that doesn't want to mix gray and doesn't want to mix mud. It wants to keep vibrancy. And I think blue feels like a really great color choice for being in a flow state because it's not producing mud or like, super kind of grizzly grays.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, yeah, emphasis on vibrancy, I think definitely an importance of that.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I like these ones that really, some of them do feel like the process of your body or stamping or about your body than imprinting or creating, but then you do have such a wonderful sense of, you know, the edge and creating space and making this painting that, has a great composition to it. Are there any painters that get into your rhythm of practice that before you go into the studio and you're in the flow state? Are there painters outside of like Bacon who you've mentioned in the past that you're thinking of as like helpful to get through a painting as a strategy?
Hmm. Oh, it's interesting. Just to say the composition of that painting happened entirely by accident. So I poured paint and overnight it moved to where it wanted to go.
Mm.
But it's quite interesting how the composition kind of found
Mm-hmm.
itself. But yeah, I mean, I definitely hold a lot of painters in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's a good question how helpful it is because you're holding them there and they're
Mm-hmm.
helpful, but also you don't want them at the same
Right.
you kind of don't want them at the same time, it's like you want to make something as great as them, but not in the same way as them, and it can't be in the same
Mm-hmm.
way as them,
Mm-hmm.
but you're holding it up there as this magic that you've seen, and you want that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a funny one.
Yeah, it
It's
is. Yeah. That's very relatable.
yeah.
I feel like I
Um,
think about painters, and then when I go to the studio, I try to think about absolutely nothing, that is trying to eject all of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or maybe I find myself thinking about other strategies when I'm really feeling like I'm making a terrible painting. Like I have like a oh no, I'm in trouble list, in my studio of people that like activate things in different ways. But yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I would I want to be respectful of the room because what little I've gotten to see, it seems like we have tons of questions for you, Katy, and
Hmm.
I am just really so honored to get to talk to you today and talk through this amazing show. And I want to encourage everyone to go see it while you can, but would love to open this up for others to get to talk to you too. And thank you for this opportunity. It's been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, thank you both so much. So we have a couple questions here. The first one is from GE. You can unmute GE. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you so much, Katy. Question is very, very simple. What was the first art that really switched you on, and how did that happen?
Oh, that's a good question. The first piece of art that I saw that really switched me on, or I mean, the minute you said that, David Hockney springs to mind. So I'm from a similar area in the UK as him, from the north, and I suppose he was one of the few artists, him and Lowry, I guess, who were from the north, who you knew about, who had made it, as an artist who was doing it as a career. and my parents were art teachers, and we had a lot of David Hockney prints around the home and his books on the shelf. So that, yeah, I'd say that was definitely an influence. But then the artwork that they had around the house, and then in contrast to my grandparents' homes, you know, as I was talking about before, the generational contrast and the different things. I also, yeah, I remember these paintings in the dentist once, and they stick with me. And I wonder if it's kind of why I like these kind of salvage paintings. They really perplexed me, because I don't know if someone had told me that they weren't very good. You know, maybe my parents had, or whether I'd worked out that perhaps because they were in this dentist waiting room, they weren't, you know, held in great esteem. But they really intrigued me, because they were sort of bad and good all at the same time, and there was something I was really loving about them. And I think that's always interested me, that cusp of nasty, nice, good painting, bad painting, you know, these questions that arise. So yeah, I'd say those kind of formative kind of influences. Yeah.
I get that. I really do. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thanks, G, for your question. Our next one's going to be from Elise. You can go ahead and unmute to ask.
Got it. Hi, Katy.
Hello, hi.
Hi, I love your work so much, and I've loved it
Oh,
ever
thank
since
you.
I first saw it in art form. I saw one or a piece that was part of what the interviewer showed, so it was fun to see the trajectory. My question now, I love the emphasis on flow state, but my real question is can you talk a little more about how you use your body, and if that's connected to kind of losing thinking and, you know, accident, like if you, yeah.
Yeah, well, I sit on them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you care what happens to your clothes, or you just have clothes that are like?
Oh no, so I mean, I wear incontinence pants. It gets very silly. Yeah, but I do tend to get a bit covered in paint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose I picked that body part because I couldn't see what it was doing.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah.
I also liked the mark that it made, because I have tried to replicate it with tennis balls, basketballs, but I don't quite get the same sort of pressure or mark.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very interesting. So then, therefore, like sometimes you put them flat on a surface so you can sit on them, or would you like back up to one that's on the painting wall, or both, or?
Oh, yeah, they're normally on the floor, and then I'll
Is that how
sit
you
on
work?
them. But I have sometimes done it kind of mid-walk, just.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
generally, yeah, they're on the floor.
And then also
Yeah.
just quickly, like what do you think of Howard Hotchkiss and his use of framing, and what's the connection of that to yours, or is there none? I think it's brave. Like, I love Howard Hotchkiss, and I think it's brave to take on something that is associated with him. I mean, I like his framing also with a slash of paint top, bottom, and side, but it feels so much like his signature.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the first to have done it.
Right.
You know, there are quite a few artists prior to him who did paint on the frame and use the found frame. But I know that people have that association.
Well, I think you may have answered it. Like, it's kind of a fresh to say he's not the first, and everything in that Asker Jorn, everything in that Petzel show, Des Tournements was like that too. You're right. So he kind of takes it back from him and puts it with everybody.
I don't know, but I don't know. It's a good question. I've always felt this a different kind of thing going on. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I guess I just did it anyway.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And I feel, sorry,
please,
I
go ahead.
was just saying, like, I personally, like, I brought up that vandalism show because I do think that that stuff is, you know, clouded around, but what I love about your work, Katy, is it doesn't feel like vandalism at all. It doesn't feel like the paint over or like the addition to. It feels like something very different, and it reminds me of like, I mean, I teach, but like being an art student, there's always the fun of like finding a leftover painting and like painting over it because it had its own life already that you had to react to. And I don't know, I've always liked painters that have been attracted to that sense of stepping into something that I think you do really well. That it's not about erasing, or it's not the erase de Kooning or anything. It is the I don't know. There's a humor and a fun to it that I really like. That I think Elise is getting at as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I guess a kind of, yeah, and a looking at ourselves, the way we are, kind of across time, what we value and then discard, and then what makes the cut and what doesn't, what that says about us, and the transiency of that.
And
But
then
yeah,
sitting
I
on
kind
it.
of love these things, and then yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I find you and
Oh,
I find your work so inspiring, but I also really love what you're saying about it. It's really energizing and inspiring.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise, for that question. I just have a quick one, Katy, about your titles. They're quite like punchy, and I appreciate those. I wonder if you would just talk briefly about your process there.
With the titles now, I think they are, for me, kind of an aid to remember what my preoccupation was at that time, or like I was saying to Andrew earlier, the kind of batches in which they fall, the groups, if you like, the current inspiration or the recurrent themes. So yeah, they're an aid to remember for me, but also, yeah, kind of an explanation of where I'm at that time. Yeah.
Thank you all for your questions. And I see Fong there. So our last one will be from you, Fong. Go ahead. You should.
Thank you, Katy.
Hello, Fong.
Hello. Sorry, I wasn't exactly tuning in the whole time. I was traveling through subway, but I love the conversation, the deliberate thoughtfulness, the slowness, taking your own time to think through things. Like that's the best way to talk about painting. To say what you mean and mean what you say, you know. And I must say that I love the show. I confess that it have the best spirit of anarchy that embodied in every brushstroke, and all the brushstroke was never repeated ever. So I think that's fascinating to me. And your reference to athleticism is a very poignant one, because in a way, the painting looks so fluid and seamlessly effortless. And I think that's what athlete does. You know, you train yourself day in, day out. I watched the Michael Jordan documentary, and he showed up to practice an hour or two, and he stayed behind another hour or two than any of those great players from the Chicago Bulls, including the great Scottie Pippen. But the point is that, you know, the same thing can apply to ballet dancing. The idea that you work so hard, you made that practice into your routine. Only when you make that beautiful leap, it's show no sweat. And I think that's exactly what the reference to athleticism is so poignant, so right on. Okay, now leading to my question. I have many, but I want to ask one because of that relationship, that preparation. There's a difference between Francis Bacon's studio, which I have been to in the early 90s, 91, and I have been to Willem de Koonen's studio just prior 2 years before that. And they're different. And my question is, how did you prepare yourself, Katy? You know, what are the preparation process before you undertake to paint the painting? Is there a ritual? How clean is your palette? How the paint tube is squeezing out in certain way, in very deliberate, because it's the size of a painting, which has never been big, which is not the question. I'm sure that maybe Andrew had already asked the question about the intimacy. You know, there's a monumentality of the image, but it's kept and painted in such an intimate size. So that's had a lot to do with what some kind of preparation, whether it's in the studio or it's a mental material related, I meant, and the mental preparation. So can you share with us that lengthy, unclear question of mine?
I mean, I have certain things that I do every day. I do like routine, and I think, yeah, maybe it's an element of ritual, but so since I learned transcendental meditation, I meditate twice a day. And I like to have my walk before I start painting now. So it's kind of like my warm up and my kind of chance to commune with nature. Like I feel, you know, that's very important. But I think there is this thing about kind of priming the body. So, you know, the studio is not comfortable. There's no heating. There's nowhere nice, you know. I have a kettle there. I got one once because someone came for a studio visit, but I never make a drink. I make all my drinks before I get in there. And I sort of feel you prime the body so that it's like at this time when we're in this place, this is what we do, and then we get out, we leave. And so when I'm in the studio, it's very much get on with the focus work, and then go. And I work for normally like 3 or 4 hours. I mean, sometimes 5, but generally 3 or 4. And it's quite intense. Yeah.
Interesting. You talk just like David Lynch.
Oh, really?
Yes, indeed. I would send you my interview with David. But Katy, thank you so much. Congratulations on a beautiful show. And thank you, Andrew. And got to think some more and I will write you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fong. Thank you. Lovely to chat.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And so here at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading, and I'm so thrilled to welcome poet Mel Elberg here today. Mel Elberg is a poet and a collaborator. She has poems published in the Brooklyn Rail, Bathhouse, New Pinky, the chapbook Rot Red, and elsewhere. Her first full-length book, The Kisser, is forthcoming. Thanks for being here, Mel. Turn it to you. Oh, wait, you're just muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks, Eleanor and Fong and Brooklyn Rail for having me. Thanks, Katie, for that talk. I really like what you said about the painting paints itself and the poem writes itself. And I also think we're kind of just mediums. This is called Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Everything is Political. To the window. 1,000 salutations to the sun and blessings before and after each one to recreate time. 1,000 minutes to the confinement, is it in the mind? And poems before and after each eye blink to restate surprise. 1,000 gimmicks to the game, walking it, sharking. He brings out the knife to relate something ancient in soft geometries. Salute the sky, comb the minutes, hop the ball. It's really the sound of it for me, and the only sport I play in passing. I prayed to the hawk and the table, the wind and the eye and the ball. I sent beams of prayers from my giant room to the little sky, sent my giant letter, and a little God came down to tell me why all manner of things small and big felt also the other shortly in this long-lined lifetime. This is called Ceasefire Now, Free Palestine, Ceasefire Now. Dead cosmos, my baby, a brighter star in the cold blanket of alpha, beta, to be burning fire, maybe dead long before she reaches me. A ghost animated only by the gam I read, the light pattern left for me in pamphlets on my kitchen window. Alienated while the star table eats for two. This is your head, deltas. These are your arms, those your legs. The lifting double skyful. You make me read like a map whose rule is more often violated than little it is not. Lights to name to the end, to praise epsilon, epsilon to the end. This is called Free Palestine, Ceasefire Now, from the river to the sea. Counting down, when you were just a little dream in my belly, a little tick in my eyebrow lid, when I was just a baby and cold, when I was just a bitch with my basket, browsing in my godsister's basement, when I was only reading Plath and magazines and girlies' facial expressions after I made them laugh, 13, attempting to gauge their propensity towards lesbianism, experimenting with building sentences devoid of nouns, existing only in a glowing vision. How can you love me? How can you love me when I'm only one figure in the long and toxic number of humanity? Two legs among the resistance, how briefly it floats me to ride in this heavy metal earth machine, that yellow fucks. Y, the engine purring, Z, before it was just a stone in my periphery. Now I'm at the bottom of the zero, positively marching my feet to the party. This is called Peace, Peace, Ceasefire Now, Ceasefire Now. The heart is ruthless, reckless. Seabirds fly vertically past its 7th floor hospital window. The organ most merciless. The organ player's madness, flying off the organ's handle, loose. Its hand in my hand goes numb. My blood moves one way, then thinks to go another. Turned, tuned. The heart is engorged, enraged. Who could ever engage with it and not stutter? Thunder as hard as thunder. The heart's payback that does not, will not play. This is called Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Ceasefire Now. Tell a soul, tell mine the single digit of the world, for the God-hold splintered into many small religious objects. Tell a soul the sacrum of your poem, your palm, the ancient one, you wrote with your wind pen in the trees when both you and the trees were very old. Tell me the spirits that swam down your wind throat, that swam in your darkness toward the mythical number 3, the three of souls. Subject me to this soul encounter or nothing at the senior center of all holy rollers. Nothing, let me roll it to you, through it, will tell me, one in a whisper, whose sole purpose, whose sole purposeful, proposed or by accident, tell me so my lonely, lonely, lonely garden grows. How long will it take me to clean your house? I'm actually looking for somewhere to live. I'm looking for somewhere as a living space. I'm at the shelter now, but I'm looking. I have a daughter, and I don't want any perverts. I'm looking for somewhere that we can live. Are any of you from here? I'm looking for a place that we can go. I'm actually looking, and I have a daughter looking for a place we can, somewhere, actually. This is called Free Palestine, ceasefire now, all will be free, peace, 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 peace. You lie, you liars. You take our language, our resistance, and bastardize it. You take our love and misuse it, murderous, carelessness, murderous, mnemonic, demons in the man machine, rolling over the poorest of them all. The poorest are the holiest, everyone knows that, and taking our verbs, the action, to misinterpret it for the purpose of the war machine, the war on the purpose, the poorest and the holiest. For your machine, even Jesus would never forgive, bombs over bombs in the place of the heads of the dead, ours, of the dead and your dreams, yours, should you sleep while the machine roars on. Does your subconscious bring back the babies you with bombs for heads? Will you, and daring to call it a god, liars. Liars replace names with numbers, Muhammad, Ahmed, Fatima, Maryam, Gaza, more than 11,000 dead. Spell it, more than 11,000. Replace the fabric of Khaled, Mona, Ali, Youssef with mine-infested lines in the sand, sick as a general or someone cut off from water and medicine. Sick as a foot soldier, his soul is rotting from the inside outwards. His words are rotting, have been rotting in his head. What would his mother say to him? What could the great mother even say? Were the warmonger, his infantry, given one last chance, one grace, where the lie and its words, its world dies within him, the war man and its infants. The world is filled with beautiful people holding each other, chaining themselves together in a symbolic chain of peace, billions of great-hearted people seemingly at the mercy of a small, sadistic contingent of hateful men with the most violent, most final weaponry, but not the most powerful. And what if what we hold in our hands, what if in our hands is not power? It is not power, and so cannot be overtaken. It is not power, and so nothing, no one, nothing could take it. Nothing, no one, nothing. Peace, 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 ceasefire now. Peace, peace, peace. Nothing is mightier when, nothing is mightier than. This is the last one. Its quietude is its power, its subtle dribble, its silent, by turns spherical, in the mythical turn of its letter. I could spend my life in a single letter of it, like a long dead scholar. Before the invention of carving clay impressions, Aleph, I brought it home in my mind. Aleph, I carved it into a heaven. A bet, I painted it with my broomstick. A bet, I flew it away. Thank you, Free Palestine, ceasefire now. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mel, so much. Wow, really, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Katy and Andrew. And we also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible. Today's full event has been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel shortly. For the past 23 years, the Brooklyn Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our free monthly publication and public events like our daily NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support the Rail. And join us the rest of this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for virtual screenings curated by Alice Nyanpuko on the occasion of Singing in Unison Part 8, Between Waves at Industry City. And you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all again so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel, for your reading.
Thank you all.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mel.
Wonderful seeing you
Thank
all.
you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good seeing all of you.
Well, thank
Take
you.
care. Have a
Mel.
good holiday.